we addressed many different questions. I also see Will and Rob also joined us. Hello, Will. Hello, Rob.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hello. Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. Hello, Rob.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So you may not see it early on. So we talk about future of remote work, and some part of it also I also added in the incoming slides as well as part of our reviews of the studies and surveys. So looks like the future is hybrid office. That is how it looks. So nowadays many companies are on in a way that they are working remotely, and some companies we see hybrid, but the future looks like hybrid. That is the term that we have been seeing in surveys and other research data so far. So of course there may be some risk associated with this approach. So yeah, definitely looking forward to talking about it with you and learning from you based on your experience. Definitely, that is very important. Also, it was interesting to know. Also, 65% of employees, they actually find the remote work experience to be successful. That is also an interesting finding as well. Companies, especially employees, find it that way. But another note, though, from the Harvard Business Review, saying that the initial results of actually remote work may be positive in terms of cost savings and performance, but at the same time, it comes at a cost. It may come at a cost in the long run, for example, especially for the difficulty to collaborate with team members and not having face-to-face interactions for the operations and activities, for example. So that is a challenge as well. So the solution is utilizing technology and having the hybrid work environment. That is how it looks. Another interesting finding was actually the way that actually employers and employees looking at being in the office is different. So from the employer's point of view, being in the office is actually about productivity. So you need to be in the office to have a productive work experience or productive work outcome or delivery, I must say, or performance. From the employee's point of view, being in the office is actually about collaboration, communicating with other team members, sharing. So there is also a difference in terms of how two parties are looking at it in terms of working in the office. Well, having said that, Ralph, Will, why don't we get started if that's okay?
Sure, that sounds great.
Great.
Okay. So I received your presentations yesterday. I put them together, and I actually combined them into my slides. So I took the liberty of organizing those. But of course, content is yours, and we are definitely looking forward to learning from you. So I'm gonna, if that's okay, I'll move my slides forward, and we can get started.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it. So okay, let's move forward. And yes. So well, in this session we call it expert hour, and we'll talk about what type of risks are there for remote work for businesses as well as individuals, and how to mitigate risk in this competitive marketplace, especially when we are working remote. Also, to complement this, also we'll be talking about how you can actually manage your risk, how you can assess your risk digitally, how you can mitigate your risk digitally, how you can manage the records digitally on QDMS software. So we are combining both. So we have the experts here with us in this expert hour. So we'll learn from them as to risks available in the marketplace, and I will combine it with a practical knowledge as to how you can actually digitize risk management, having the foundational information, the fundamentals of risk management in mind. Is being gonna learn in a minute. So that is what we'll talk about in this session, followed by other expert hours coming up, as you see on our agenda. Great. So today we have a panel. I briefly greeted them, but I need to also present them and introduce them myself properly. So we have Rob Tokarski with us from SYNERGIZE Insurance Company. We work very closely with Rob. He's an expert in risk mitigation, and he's been working in many different industries for many years. And he's very experienced and always open for helping and assisting organizations for risk assessments and risk mitigation, because there is actually his experience, his expertise, and I'd like to welcome Rob to our panel discussion. Thank you very much, Rob, for being with us. Also today we have Will Newman with us. He's with Becker Glean, and he's an attorney, and he'll also be with us today about legal considerations of risk management, what to be in mind, what to consider, and how you can mitigate it. Also, we work very closely with Will as well. He's always helpful in assisting us as to legal considerations of different subject matters, especially risk management is one of them, as we perform some webinars together before. So, Will, thank you very much for joining today's panel discussion in Expert Hour. Appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So we are looking forward to it, as always, to learning from you guys. Thank you. And also we have Sam Watt with us, my colleague, our software engineer from our engineering team, and Sam will be showing and telling about QDMS software as to how to assess risk, how to mitigate risk, how to keep the records of risk management, and how you can get the notifications, reminders, and escalations while you are managing your risk assessment activities. So I'll just start with some findings, some studies that we found while we were making our research about what is going on in the marketplace for current and future remote work environment. So one of the surveys that we got is about about remote work, and it was about what do executives think about remote work from the employer's point of view. And it is a survey performed by PwC. It was in June of last year, and they asked some questions. For example, what percent of your office employees do you anticipate will work remotely at least one day a week, in terms of trying to understand their projections moving forward. So before before COVID-19, it was 36%, for example. But 36%. During COVID-19, it happened to be 77% of executives think that office employees will be in the office, will be working remotely at least one day a week. So it is actually more during COVID-19, of course. In terms of projections, what will be after the pandemic, their projections happens to be 55%. So as you see, in comparison to before pandemic season, there is going to be more remote work will be happening. That's the expectation from the executives, from the employers' point of view, which that's actually in line with what I just shared early on in terms of expectations of employees and employers as to how it's going to be remote work moving forward after pandemic goes away. And another survey, it's actually part of the same survey, same study, is about employees. So we just talked about the executives, employers' point of view in terms of their expectations, how it is going to be in terms of remote work, and how about employees? Where do they want to work? So when you look at these answers, there's before and after, before COVID-19 and after COVID-19, where do they want to work? So before COVID-19, for example, I didn't work remotely 39%, for example, and after it actually changed, right? You can see the change on the slide, as well as 1 day per week. So before it was 18%, after it's expected to be 9%, for example. 2 days per week, for example, it was 6% before, and after it's going to be 14%. So So when you look at it, when you go one by one and when you go all the way down, before, for example, 5 days per week working remotely, it was 18% before COVID-19. But after COVID-19, it's 32%. So it is actually more than before when we look at it in terms of where they want to work. So initially, that's a new experience, working remotely for everybody. But at the same time, once the employees see the advantages of working remotely, then you see it more often in terms of choices as to where do they want to work or how often they want to work remotely. Another survey that actually we found on Forbes, for example, in a survey that 77% of respondents are currently working from home. And based on that, trust is a vital aspect of employees' effectiveness. That's one of the findings. Another one is 90% of respondents are open to their employers having greater insights into their daily productivity. So they like to work remotely, and they're okay to be working very close with their employers as to their daily productivity. And 47% of respondents said they have been frustrated by their efforts not being recognized by their company, for example. So these are all certain the signs as to how we need to be actually approaching remote work while we are seeing the changes in the marketplace right now from remote work to hybrid work environment. So some takeaways based on these survey results that I just shared, also based on the survey results that I shared earlier in my presentation, while I was in the opening remarks section, is basically offices are here to stay, but they'll be changing, they'll be evolving, basically. So we are not closing all our offices, but they're going to be different. They are going to be different than before. That is for sure. So the common expectation nowadays is actually have a co-working environment instead of dedicated desks, for example. So that is one of the expectations. Also, remote work is here to stay as well, similar to offices. So, but they offer new challenges regarding collaboration and communication. As I shared other research results in my presentation, for example. So, well, while and we saw the actually similar results in Harvard Business Review study as well. So, in the short run, we see cost savings and productivity in remote work, but it comes at a cost. So, in the long run, then we need to. There's going to be some side effects. It is because as human beings, we need to collaborate, we need to work together, we need to work closely, we need to see each other, we need to observe while working. So when you put all these together, the collaboration and communication is going to be the challenge of the remote work moving forward more and more before. That is actually why it looks like hybrid office is an address, is the solution to this challenge, addressing this challenge. Employers are concerned about employees' remote work performance. That is another takeaway. So remote work performance management is actually another important subject matter, and I'll be talking about it tomorrow morning during the opening session. And what type of tools, whatever methods that we can actually implement to set first of all the set goals, realistic goals for performance management, how to monitor KPIs, and how to measure performance for continuous improvement while working remotely or working in a hybrid office environment. So I'll be talking more about these in terms of performance management more tomorrow morning. Employees are okay for employers to have greater insights and visibility regarding performed tasks and operations. And employees are not happy about not being recognized for their work and effort. So you're not working in the same office anymore, you're not able to see each other, you're not able to communicate that much. So, the recognizing employees is also another important subject matter and another challenge, it looks like, based on the survey results that we have been reviewing and studying from different sources. So having said that, I just laid the foundation as to how is the current remote work landscape and how the future remote work experience will be, and the future looks like it's going to be a hybrid office work experience followed by remote work experience. And let's talk about risks coming with remote work and how to mitigate risks. So for that, I like to invite Rob for our virtual stage, and let's learn from Rob as for risk management, risk mitigation, and other important subject matters. Rob, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, great. I have your slides, so I'll run them for you one by one.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. So that was great information, Kevin. And it was kind of a perfect lead, and I'm going to build upon that lead in a little bit. Then I'll say I'm going to officially introduce myself and give you a little bit of background about myself and USI, because I think it's going to be very relevant to then further enhancing about risk management and kind of ways to look at it. So I think this is a the title of this section of this presentation is really how to manage individual and corporate remote work performance amidst the COVID-19, and that's very telling, because if you noticed from the facts and figures given a little bit earlier, boy, things change in a year, huh? And you look at that, and companies' business models shift, and they shifted. Company and employee preferences shift very quickly. And I think that the facts and figures that were just shown less than 5 minutes ago really demonstrate that point. And when that happens, it also shows that the better companies that are able to adapt are going to be able to survive, and not only survive but thrive. And one of those ways that many businesses are adapting is by this remote work environment, and having either some level of a hybrid or a full work from home. As Kevin had said, really the future, at least in the short term from what we see, obviously, and I'll say to the midterm, is that there is going to be a greater amount of remote work being done moving forward than there was pre-pandemic, and that's pretty obvious. So with that being said, there's three things really that we're going to focus, and I'm sure Will and Sam will focus on moving forward through this presentation. First is in this case is identifying the additional risks that a full remote, or more likely most companies will have this hybrid workforce, are going to pose. The second is going to be mitigating those risks before, during, and after your employees begin working from home. The stuff that we're going to be talking more about. You're going to be interacting with an insurance professional more before and during than most likely after, because if we set the table the right way, you'll be interacting more, and then currently with somebody like Sam when he talks about some of the tools that are available that are going to help your business moving forward, because it's all the setup. And then somebody like a Will, you're going to be interacting, or potentially be interacting with, even more so current and then future model, because Will's the one that's going to help if there's issues that kind of arise, and being able to mitigate them before they become a serious legal consideration. And then the last thing is addressing those issues that are going to arise that arise due to having those remote work options as part of your business model, things you would never have thought of or dreamed of, or even planned for before pre-pandemic. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, Kevin. So actually, there was just a quick introduction for myself before we get into the top insurance challenges. I'm going to say, so my name is Rob Takashewski, and I'm the Vice President of Property and Casualty for USI Insurance. USI Insurance Services is one of the top 6 international insurance brokers and risk management consultants worldwide. And I'll use the basics in that there's a difference between a broker and an agent, in that a broker is working on behalf of the company or their client. And that's an important facet, because we would take your business to various insurance companies that would underwrite the various policies, and we want to present you as a good risk. And how do we do that? Well, we look to understand your business. We look to use metrics, we look to use benchmarking, we look to use analytics that define where your business is today and where it's going in the future. And obviously with remote work becoming such a huge part of business models and changes, well, making sure that you have the right coverages in place and the risk mitigation strategies in place that keep your business safe, your employees and customers safe, and plans for any possible events that may occur that would interrupt your business operations. And with remote work becoming a more prevalent, and it's here to stay, obviously making sure that you're addressing those things in this new world model. So that being said, let's go on to the top challenges, or let's talk about the top insurance risks to be concerned about. Yep. Okay. So first of all, I talked about identifying the additional risks that a hybrid workforce would pose. In the past, I'll say the big insurance concerns and the biggest challenges to business was always the traditional: if there was a fire, if there's a flood, if there was a windstorm or hurricane, and it damaged my property, and I'm going to be down, I have to be concerned with that. And how do I mitigate that through some sort of insurance policies? And from a workforce perspective, workers' compensation. And, if there's a slip and fall, if there is an auto accident, before or after, or, going to visit clients, those types of things were, the bigger concerns years ago. Now, and I'll say this was even starting before, pre-pandemic, and then moving forward, it becomes even more so with the remote work model. You have, again, workers' compensation liability. So you have workers, you're concerned with the safety of your employees. In the past, the slips and falls are on site. You're able to see and mitigate those. But what about slips and falls within the home? If someone is working from home and something happens to them, how does your insurance policy adjust to that? What have you done to help train or educate them as to, I think Kevin mentioned earlier, a lot of times it's recommended having a separate space that's affords you to work, remotely. Well, if you don't have that separate space, or if it's, kind of a hybrid space even within your home, what steps has the employee taken to mitigate anything that might, hurt them and put them out of commission and, put the business at risk? So workers' comp, again, there's additional things. The COVID-19, if if the employee contracts it and they're working in a hybrid environment, did they contract it at home? Did they contract it while at the place of business? Those are the things you got to document and be aware of, and see if and when and how your policy may look at that. So when you look at those things, there's so many more things that kind of come into play than before when it comes to workers' compensation, even mental health issues. Being able to notice changes in an employee, and a lot of times it's it'll have to be through the quality of work or the dedication to work or how they respond, but you're not able to read body language as much. You're not able to, if someone's coming in late or going early, there's got to be ways to be able to assess that situation. EPL and directors and officers liability, where we become a very litigious society, and now with the challenges that remote work pose, as a leader in your organization, being able to have benchmarking and having the ability to ensure consistency in performance management. And I'm sure that's what we're going to hear from Sam and Kevin and others moving forward, is having that consistency and how to have that consistency. The level of acceptable monitoring of remote work employees. So where's privacy versus public now as it relates to work being done in the home? All of those things, and cyberbullying, things that the written word is so much harsher than the spoken word a lot of times, and there's also that digital record of how someone is what someone is writing down now moving forward. you as an executive or as a company owner will have greater liability if you haven't had or put things in place, such as training, such as manuals and best practices to be able to guide those. You most likely have them in place when you had a regular work environment. Now having a hybrid one, those things will need to be updated, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then a really big one is cyber liability. So everything being done remotely, obviously computers are in effect there, and cyber probably one of the biggest concerns has always in the last couple of years now has been about cyber breaches, ransomware. You cannot turn on the news without hearing about how some sort of data has been compromised by it. When an organization has had it and hackers got into it, whether it's from a medical perspective, whether it's from a retail perspective, whether it's from a manufacturing perspective. Big and small companies are affected by cyber, and there's standalone cyber policies, and that's a huge business. That's one of the areas that USI and myself really concentrate on, because that is probably one of the areas that the risks that are out there are becoming more and more dangerous to business interruptions and complete shutdowns of companies. There's facts and figures that exist out there that talk about a business that has been breached, a small or mid-sized business that has been breached, 40% of the time, they cannot fully recover and will be out of business within the next 12 to 24 months because of their inability to fully recover from that. So really planning before time, because these risks are out there. Is you got to be able to identify them, you got to be able to mitigate them, and then ultimately be able to know how to react to them when they do occur. And the cyber breach and the social engineering ransomware, a lot of that is because of unfortunately because of employee, I don't want to say negligence, but all you need is that one time for an employee to click into an email or a link that looks legitimate, and the network's now been compromised. And now with the remote work being such a big piece of the business model, that becomes even more important, is that the protection of the network and your data and obviously your business operations. And you'll see policy language and terms and conditions really addressing certain cyber events that occur, and not all of them, and really speaking with your broker or your agent upon policy renewals or way before that, as your business model has changed, is really urgent, because of there's so many different additional risks that are now inherent when it relates to cyber. And then ensuring the proper cyber hygiene by the work from home employees. They're working from their home network versus and they're tying into your business network. And if that tie-in is compromised in any way at the employee's home network, it's going to very quickly become a problem for the work network. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I talked about the first part of it is identifying. Now, how do you mitigate them, and what do you need to do? And when I say mitigate, how do you minimize it? How do you minimize some of these risks before, during, and after your employees begin working from home? Well, in this case now, the work from home model has been in place for the past year. So steps have already been taken by many companies to help in some of the mitigation tactics. At the same time, what we're finding is the things that people put in place, company leaders put in place for their organizations to do in order to function, were put in place very quickly as a way to keep their business operations moving through the height of the pandemic. Well, from an operational perspective, a lot of the procedures and the rollouts for enabling the remote from work were smooth. Unfortunately, you learn as you go, and making sure that as you learn how things occur. So events may occur at the home, and I mentioned, some cyber events. What are you doing, and what steps are you taking to mitigate that? Is there documentation? Are you documenting the ways that the employee should be signing onto a network? Are you then reviewing and reinforcing the policies and procedures? And I'll say, are you also updating them as you find, the hackers out there of the world are very sophisticated, and they change their tactics, and they change the way that they look to penetrate your network and to get the data information and to potentially lock up your business. So are you not only changing with the times in terms of updating the software you may be using for your company, updating the hardware that you have, but also updating the training programs, the training manuals, the things that you're doing and that you would do when you onboard a new employee. And a lot of times annually, you have employees go through certain training to ensure a level of competency, but also a level of safety. Are you updating those training programs, and are you taking advantage of them? A lot of your partners, such as an insurance or legal, have various resources available, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But they're available for you to utilize either free of charge or minimally. Why wouldn't you take advantage of that if it's going to help mitigate the risks now with this new business model? And I'll say the last piece of this is just the consistent communication and feedback. And this is a piece that Will talk about shortly, because are you providing that consistent communication and feedback so there's no surprises if and when something happens, and then you have to either reprimand an employee or you have to terminate them? And are you treating them any differently because of their status as either their status as a hybrid employee or a level of hybrid employee, that this employee works 5 days a week from home versus someone else that works 1 day? And did I give them the same training, the same level, the same feedback? And am I constantly in communication with them about their performance or about the ways that they should be conducting the business and the protections they should be affording when they're at home? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay. And then, in this case, it's just, I say, now that you've identified, now that you began to mitigate them, how are you addressing the issues that do arise due to the remote work options as part of your business model? There's additional risks. I'm not to say that any are any worse or better than if they were working in the office. It's just that there's additional risks and different things to look for. So with that being said, and it's still a new world order in terms of the remote work environment, but as was mentioned earlier, this is here to stay. That being said, if it's here to stay, what are you doing to access available resources that are going to support your new business model, your hybrid business model, and your structure? There's an awful lot of them that are out there, from consulting partners and like-minded professionals to determine the best practices. A lot of times there's training classes, there's manuals that are available and guides on how to provide those manuals to the employees and how to write them. There's and you got to make sure that you're updating all your stuff. Everything's going to be, each business is going to be different, so there's some similarities to the types of risks, but there's also a lot of differences based on the business model that you have and the type of business that you're involved in. So updating your safety manager, training manager, internal documentation that are customized specifically to your own risks, your own company risk, and your own employee risk are going to be important. And then we talk about this. Will and I have done presentations before, and we talk about documenting. So important to make sure that you have a written account of how you've gone about to, in the fact that you identified, you mitigated, and the steps you've taken to address issues, before, during, and after, and making sure that you have that written information available should a question arise when you have a claim that you're filing, or if, God forbid that there is an instance that you need to, you need to go to court or you have legal implications. The last piece that I'll just touch on briefly before I turn it over to Will is, and I have this in red, obviously, because I am an insurance professional, is making sure that you're reviewing and updating your insurance policies. Most businesses and most company leaders only think about insurance, even though it's a big ticket item in terms of costs that are involved on an annual basis, is 2 weeks before time when they have to renew. And they have to write that check for all of the various insurance policies they have out there. But you're spending a lot of money on insurance. And really, what is insurance? Insurance is simply the transferring of risk. The more insurance you have, the more risk, in effect, you're transferring into the insurance company. The less insurance you have is the more risk that you're taking on yourself and you're mitigating on your own. Each business is going to be different based on their appetite for risk and the company owner or the corporate executives and their, like I mentioned, the appetite for risk. But in this case is making sure that you know what your level of risk is and then addressing the policies to have them. I mentioned you have companies that in this new work environment that were manufacturing cars, and they went and they started manufacturing ventilators from a medical perspective. You have restaurants that have gone from having 100% sit-down dine-in service to now more of their business being delivery. There's different changes to the business model. There's different additional risks that are out there. Have you updated the policies to address that? Remote work. You now have more companies working from home. Do you have a cyber policy in place? And if you do, does it address network, the breaching of a network on site as well as off site? Does it address first party and third party coverages and the types of breaches that may occur, whether it's and the steps that needed to be taken to mitigate that? Do you have dual authentication for identifying someone that's serving on that's getting onto a server? And if so, are you changing that regularly, and how are you doing that? Those are the things that you need to make sure that you're aware of. And the best source of that is obviously your insurance professional. You're paying for the policies, but you're also paying for their knowledge, and you're paying for their expertise. And the more that they understand your business and your business model, the better they'll be able to recommend and customize an approach for risk mitigation that are going to suit this change to the business model, especially in light of the remote work environment. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to, or back to Kevin, and then ultimately to Will, that kind of talk about now the legal considerations and things to be aware of from a legal implications that are out there.
Well, thank you very much. Very, very informative, very educational, as always. Appreciate it. Thank you for sharing. Will, if you are ready, floor is yours.
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Rob. I learned a lot right there. So thanks for sharing that. So, Christine, if you go to the next slide, I was going to talk about my understanding of the future of remote work, and I think that when we think of remote work in the future, we imagine working alongside of robots, some of which look like people, but others, I guess, look like file cabinets with glowing eyes and arms. Most of us imagine working on the moon or on other planets is also another part of the future of remote work. Talking to kids that don't know what fax machines or VCRs are, that part of the future is already here and is scary, and I'm going to talk for a little bit about how to prepare for that. I think most of the times I've seen movies that take place with remote work, there's some sort of evil corporation, and they have like a big industrial lair that's got like very brutalist steel architecture. So we should get ready for that. And of course, you wouldn't be able to talk about the future of work without holograms. Sometimes your boss is a hologram. Sometimes your coworkers are a hologram. And if there's a twist, maybe you're the hologram. Now, because I'm a lawyer, I represent businesses in disputes. A lot of these subjects aren't my direct expertise, but I thought it would be important when we think about the future, to think about all of these terrifying ideas, because the future can be scary. But before we get, or I guess now that we've, addressed those terrifying, I'm just going to say possibilities, but inevitabilities, let me talk a bit more about the advice and uh, the legal subjects that I'm perhaps more of an expert in. So, Krasad, if you don't mind turning to the next slide. Okay. So one thing that comes up when a workforce that used to come into one office now works from home is that it becomes a lot more complicated for any company to figure out what laws apply. If you ran a business in New Jersey and your office was in New Jersey and your employees all came to work in New Jersey, and you had to figure out what laws apply, you could just talk to a lawyer and say, well, what laws apply in New Jersey? What's the minimum wage here? What are the safety requirements here? What are, the notices that I need to give to employees that come to a workplace in New Jersey? But if you have employees throughout the country or the world, there's a possibility that you have subjected yourself to the laws of those other jurisdictions. So it could be that the minimum wage in New Jersey is $10 an hour, but it could be that if you have an employee that's working in California, $10 an hour is going to be insufficient. And so this is an additional burden on employers to, when they have employees that they know are working somewhere else, to make sure that you are complying with the laws of that somewhere else. And that's not just true about states, it's also true about municipalities. New York City has different rules than the rest of New York State. I'm sure San Francisco and Los Angeles have different rules than the rest of California, and so on. So every time you work with an employee that is not on your home premises, you should make sure that you are complying with the laws that apply specifically to where they are. Not only that, about complying with the laws, but you should consider the possibility that you will be hauled into court somewhere else. If you work in New Jersey and your employees are in New Jersey, and there is a lawsuit, there's a good chance that lawsuit will be in New Jersey. But if you have an employee that's working in Texas, they may choose to sue you in Texas. And that, it requires getting a whole new lawyer, perhaps, and the hassle and burden of defending a lawsuit where the judge and the jury are thousands of miles away. One way to get around this is, when you have an employment agreement with a future employee that's working remotely, to have them agree that if there is a dispute, that it would be decided in a forum that's convenient for you. So if you're in New York or Connecticut, to agree to have any disputes resolved there. But that's something to think about that I think has greater importance now that you can't just assume that your employees are going to be in the same building that you are. Another thing that you should talk about, or that we should talk about, is the fact that with remote workforce comes the opportunity to offshore more of your work. There's just more and more opportunities for people who are not in the United States, who perhaps work at a lower labor rate, to perform work that used to be done in-house in the United States for a higher labor rate. And there's obviously advantages. It could be less expensive, and the quality of offshore work can also be very high. So those are benefits, but there's also challenges. If there is an employee that makes a big mistake or costs the company money, there's ways to hold that employee accountable. You could sue them. You can have a contract with them that you can enforce. And that's harder to do when you offshore, because suing someone in India or in Brazil is a lot harder than suing someone where you are. And so I would recommend that before engaging in offshoring your workforce, that you think very seriously about the things that could go wrong and what to do about them. And this may be an area where Rob and insurance professionals like him would be helpful, because part of my job as a lawyer, and perhaps part of his job as well, is to think about all the things that could possibly go wrong. At the beginning of any transaction or employment relationship, you believe that this is the start of something great and only good things will happen. But just statistically, not everything works out well. And so it's better to think about what happens when things go wrong first, and then to come up with a plan, and then hopefully you won't ever need the plan. But it's better to think about it first, then deal with it later. Lastly, a lot of contracts that companies have often require them to comply with standard regimes like ISO 9001 and so on. And I know that Kursad has spoken quite a bit about how EBA and BEAM and Bimser help companies comply with these standard regimes. And if you have a contract that requires you to comply with them, and then you transition to offshore or to remote work, you should make sure that however you're doing it, you are still complying with these standards. It could be that you have these standards set up in a way that is automatic in your on-premises location, but if people are working remotely, maybe they're not following the same rules that they had on premises. I'll give you a personal example. So I work at a law firm, and at my law firm back at the office, we have our own, on premises, network and file management system. And every time I worked on a file, I would save that file to the file management system. But when I work remotely, it's just so much easier to save it to my laptop hard drive. And I do my best to put things on the document management system remotely, but it's a little harder to do that. And sometimes I forget and I have to remind myself to do it. Now, if you have a similar situation where something just is automatic when people are on premises, but there's an extra step involved when people are doing it remotely, there's a possibility that people are falling out of compliance with these standards. And if that's the case, you run the risk of breaching some contractual obligations. So I would do your best to make sure that the transition to remote work hasn't had people slip in complying with some of these standards. Let's go to the next slide. Before we go to this slide, are there any questions? Is anyone here a hologram? Let me know. You can either unmute yourself or chat, or I guess in the future people can just
Yes.
mind meld.
Hi, Bill. This is Kevin. So yeah, we are receiving some questions. What I'll do is I'll ask the questions, if that's okay, in Q&A session to you
sure.
and to Rob.
That's fine. Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. So another thing that is a challenge for a transition to remote work is that to comply with a lot of wage and hour laws, you pay employees based on the number of hours that they work. And when people would show up on premises, it was kind of easy to figure out what those hours were. People would show up at 9 a.m., they'd punch their punch card, they would be there until 5 p.m., they would punch out, and they were there for 8 hours. But when people are at home, it becomes a little more nebulous. People are kind of always on their work premises, and they may always be, you can measure it by the number of hours they're sitting in front of their computer, but it's also possible that there's downtime. So you can measure it based on the number of hours that they are available to work, the number of hours they are physically actually working. There are different ways to do it, but I would say the best thing to do is to agree with the employee ahead of time what counts as a work hour and what's expected of them. If they are expected to be available from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., those could be their work hours, even if there's no assignment for them during those hours. But if they're not expected to be, working a set number of hours, but they are given a certain amount of responsibilities, perhaps they bill for the number of hours that they take to do those responsibilities, and those can be their work hours. But it's better to have that understanding ahead of time, and then to have a dispute about it later on. And it's also better to talk with an employment lawyer ahead of time to make sure that that satisfies the requirements for the wage and hour laws. This is important for three reasons. One, to make sure that you're paying people the right amount of money. Two, because there are rules about minimum wage laws. So for example, if you think that someone has only worked 3 hours and you pay them for 3 hours, but under the law, they've really worked 9 hours and the total amount they would have made for 9 hours of a minimum wage is less than the amount that you paid 3 hours at their actual wage, then you have violated the minimum wage laws, which have higher penalties than not paying just the regular hourly wage. And then on top of that, there's many laws about when you have to pay employees overtime. And depending on uh, how many hours an employee has worked, they may qualify for overtime pay. So one thing I would recommend is to have an understanding with your employees ahead of time about what counts as a work hour, to make sure that that's legal, and then to adhere to it. It's something that, people may not think of at first, because when people start working remotely, they may just expect that everything will stay the same. But you'll notice that, remote work doesn't follow the same schedule that regular work does. People don't have childcare, and so will have to spend part of the workday attending to their families. And people will not have the same division between, working during the day and being private at night. It may be that they have to, take care of their personal responsibilities during the day and take care of work in the evening. And adjusting to that change in schedule requires being more open-minded about what counts as a work hour. Okay, next slide, I guess. Okay, one thing that has come up quite a bit for me anyway during the pandemic has been discrimination claims. It is frequent. Again, no employer thinks that they discriminate. Every employer that gets sued for discrimination goes, "What, me? I'm not, some sort of monster. I certainly haven't fired someone or treated someone differently on account of their race or religion or gender." But these claims exist, and there's ways to be proactive about them. First of all, in corporate society, there are impediments and uh, uh, disparities that exist and blind spots that people in management have that do lead to disparate treatment between men and women, between white people and people of color, between LGBT people and straight people, between cis people and trans people. This happens in society. And so, one thing that an employer should do, not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because it will reduce the likelihood that you will get sued, is to not wait for someone to sue you, but to be proactive and ask yourself, are there ways that we can be a more inclusive workforce, treat people more equally? And if there are disparities, if it happens to be that your management is largely white or your management is largely male, or any other disparity, to ask yourself why that is, and to see if there are steps that you can take to reduce those disparities. Because if you don't, not only is that bad, because it reflects the fact that there is some inequality, but it opens the door for some employee to sue you and to say, "I got paid less because I'm a member of a protected class." And a good defense in that lawsuit is to talk about all the proactive steps that you've taken to address disparities that arise in society. And if you don't have any steps like that, it becomes a harder case to defend, even if you're a good person. And how can someone make an accusation like that against me? In terms of defending the lawsuit, it's a lot easier to point to affirmative steps that you have taken to address discrimination. Another thing that I'd recommend is to get EPLI insurance. Lawsuits to defend against discrimination are expensive. I try to do, when I represent clients for them, as good a job as I can to keep costs down, but they can be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's just to defend them. That's not even, the amount that you would have to pay the other side if you lost. So I think that it is worth considering getting an insurance policy that transfers that risk. And you may think that risk is small, but I work with several employers that would swear up and down that they are not discriminatory, but they get subject to these lawsuits anyway. Another thing that you should do is, in the time of remote work, employers have been flexible. They will let employees change their schedule or change, the way in which they participate in the workforce, which is good. But they should make sure that they do so in a way that is consistent. So if you're giving exceptions to employees, ask yourself, am I doing it just for the white employees, just for the male employees, just for the younger employees? If so, then some employee that asks for a consideration, I want a day off or I want to move my work hours. If they are told no, it's only a matter of time before they talk to a lawyer that says, hey, the other employees are getting treated better than this person. One explanation is the fact that they're in a protected class. So I would come up with a policy and stick to it and make sure that people are treated consistently. Again, people don't think they are acting discriminatory, but just because you don't think you are acting discriminatory doesn't mean that an employee will agree. And I can promise you, an employment lawyer who is looking to sue you and get money from you will definitely believe that you are acting discriminatory, no matter how much you tell them that you are not. And so the best thing to do is to get out ahead of it, to be proactive, and to make your workplace the sort of one that makes a real commitment to fostering an equal and fair workplace for everybody. I think that's my last slide. Kursad, do I have another one?
Let me see. No, actually, yes, you covered your part.
Oh, cool.
Perfectly. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for listening to me, and I hope to answer your questions if you have any in a bit. But thanks again.
Yes, definitely. We have a list of questions. I'm accumulating them right now, consolidating them for you. So right after Sam's demonstration, let's have the Q&A session together, if that's all right. You, Rob, Sam, all together. We address the questions before we jump to the next session, if that's all right. Sounds good. So, okay, great. So thank you very much. We'll appreciate it. Very informative as always. We all learn a lot, and no wonder there are questions that I'm going to share with you right after this demonstration. And then we can talk more about risk assessment, risk mitigation, and how to be proactive. I love the term for being proactive. I mean, thinking ahead and being prepared for something that's before that happens or before anything happens in a preventive way or in a proactive way. So that is a great approach. That's very exciting for me personally, and I'm sure it's also helpful for our audience as well. So at the moment we are broadcasting over Zoom and YouTube at the same time. So we also are being watched we also have audience on YouTube channel of ours on YouTube Live, and we are also broadcasting on Zoom. So we have two channels running at the same time live, and at the same time we are also recording. So recordings also will be available on our YouTube channel in coming days. Great. So well, learning important things about risk assessment and risk mitigation and what to consider in terms of risk management from insurance point of view, from operational point of view, also from legal point of view. Well, from Bimser International's point of view, how do we contribute to this proactive approach, as Will nicely mentioned as well. So, eventually we are an enterprise software publisher, so we are very sensitive as to challenges in the marketplace, especially those companies are having. Nowadays we focus on remote work, especially this summit is focused on remote work and digital transformation. However, shift happens. right? So we need to be really sensitive of change. So we are really observing, following, making research, following research studies as to what companies need and what type of challenges they have. And risk assessment and risk management is a challenge, has been a challenge, and it still is. And it's also an opportunity in a way to be proactive. So because you can assess your risk, you can put together a plan, and you can basically be ready for what may be happening, or you can prevent it from happening. So that is actually, we can take control of the dynamic. That is the goal. So having said that, how do we contribute to that approach? So our contribution is with our software solution, our proprietary software solution called QDMS. QDMS is a quality, risk, audit, performance, and compliance management software. We have been developing QDMS since 1998. We have thousands of corporate users, more than 1,000 of corporate users to be more precise, and we have more than 1 million of professional users using QDMS on daily basis for risk management, for quality management, to run the management operations on daily basis. So we are proud of QDMS's achievement in the marketplace, both in North America as well as globally. And many companies also comply many different quality management standards as well with the help of QDMS in a digital environment. The reason I emphasize digital is basically very important nowadays in terms of remote work, as well as hybrid office environment, which is a feature of remote work. And one can comply with ISO requirements, FDA requirements, FAA requirements, as well as good manufacturing practices, GMP as it is shortened, SQF, DRC, as well as IATF and other standards in aerospace and defense industry as well that one can comply, as well as automotive industry, I must say. We'll be talking more about ISO 9001 in coming session as our expert hour, and Alex Kvartzorak will be with us, certified ISO lead auditor, and he'll be sharing with us information about fundamentals of ISO 9001, principles of ISO and quality, and how to comply. So please stay with us to learn more about ISO. Getting back to the risk management, now we'd like to talk about QDMS as to how you can comply with quality management standards and or how you can manage manage your risk operations, risk assessment, risk mitigation on QDMS. Also, I need to emphasize one more thing before I hand it over to my colleague Sam. As Rob mentioned earlier, and I understand Bill also agrees, is the documentation is critical, the record keeping, and that is a big problem among companies. As we know it, we witness it all the time. So that is why we are here, right? So we like to help and address these challenges and help organizations digitize their record-keeping operations as well as document management. So once you have a document, or for example, record just one time, just one set of documents, that may be manageable for you. But the challenge starts when you start changing, updating, versioning these documentation. And you have to update this is because it's coming from continuous improvement. You constantly find ways to run your operations better. So you need to update it. So you do it this way today, you do it the other way tomorrow, because it is better. It is more productive. You get more customer satisfaction out of it, and so on. So documentation and records follow, and document after document, version after version, it becomes unmanageable for those companies who are trying to actually manage on paper or simply on Word files or other types of individual files. That is why we actually created QDMS to have all these challenges. Having said that, I'd like to invite my colleague Sam Watt to our stage, our virtual stage, I must say. And Sam will be showing us how QDMS looks, how it feels, and how we are actually helping companies manage their risk assessment and risk mitigation and record-keeping operations in a digital environment. So let's keep in mind that these demonstrations and presentations are actually on a high level. There are many things to talk about. There may be different angles and different conditions and elements to be considered. So that is why I keep our contact information on the screen. So if you have any questions to any of our panelists, to me, to Rob, to Will, to Sam, please just send us an email to continue the conversation, to ask your questions, to schedule a private meeting, and we'll be happy to address and meet you specifically for your requirements and your expectations. Okay, great. I think enough said on my side. Sam, why don't you take over the screen and show us how QDMS looks and how we help organizations manage their risk assessment and risk management operations.
Sure thing. And let me
Virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And thank you for joining today's virtual conference. And this is Sam, the pre-sales software engineer of Bimser International based in New York. So in the following, I will demonstrate you QDMS, our quality, risk, audit, performance, and compliance management system. As QDMS is a web-based system, so after you're deploying the software on your cloud or on-premise server, then you can connect to the system by using your web browser. And also QDMS is a permission-based system. So not everyone can see everything. Typical example will be the modules that you can see in the main menu. So different users have different permissions based on their role, position, profession, department, and also group. And right after you log into our system, you can find all the pending tasks and also the request for approval on this home screen. So you can get a quick connection and start processing this particular request. For example, the document that is waiting for your approval. Then you can see a list and show you all the tasks that's assigned to your account. And on the top, this is the main menu of QDMS. Thanks to the modular structure of our system, you can pick and choose the modules that you want to have in your server so that you can find all those available modules in your QDMS. So, and today we will get first of all into the risk assessment management module. And in this demonstration, you can see how you can work remotely, like just connecting from your web browser, and also how to mitigate the risk of within your organization. So right here, we can start a new record for assessing our risk, and we can create different planning for different dimension, like as for health and safety, or as for IT, like the server stability, and so on in this module. And once we have our assessment planning ready, then we can create different assessment items. So as for this one, as an example, like health and safety, we can create different items for different departments, because as for different departments, the possibility of having this risk and also the impact, they might be vary, so that we can record all of the assessment as a particular item for different departments. And all the records that we have in QDMS, they are represented in different color, like red, yellow, and green. As it is in green color, meaning it's not likely that this risk happen in our company or in this department. And also the impact is not critical at all. And it is in yellow color, meaning our attention is required. And if they're in red color, meaning it's highly likely happen, this risk is highly likely happen in our company. And also the impact is critical to our department as well. And as for the risk assessment, it is not a one-time job. We have to perform it continuously in order to have our continuous improvement in our company. So that you can also see the trend of this particular record. Like if it is getting worse, if it is getting better, or there's nothing changed in terms of the likelihood, like the possibility, and also the impact. So that it will show as a flat arrow. And by coming to this screen, you can see how we are doing in terms of different, in terms of this risk to different departments. And also all your records will be saved in different version, as the system helps you to do the versioning of your risk assessment as well. And while you are creating or updating the assessment item, you can see right here, we can choose the business area, like how or which aspect that we are going to have this risk and what it is about, like internal processes, or we can pick and choose the items from the list, like, or if it is like about financial or customer relations. And also we can pick and choose the source of the risk. Like we know what is going to be happen, but how and where, so that those can be recorded in this assessment record as well. Also, we can enter the result to be recorded in this item and pick and choose the impact and also the likelihood from a scale. It can be a scale of 5 or scale of 7 or even 10. Those are configurable in our system, and based upon the actual operation or actual approach of your company, you have the capability to update the labels, the fields, and also the scale or drop-down list that we have in QDMS. And in order to reduce the impact of this risk that will bring to our company, we can also create a different precaution action as well. Like we can connect to a document that we have saved, and it can be a reference for the teams in case this risk happen, or how we can reduce this risk, or the chance this risk will happen in our company. So we can pick and choose the documents from our document management module, and also we can create a corrective action in order to cope with this risk. We can select an existing record from our corrective action module. And if you notice right here, the modules of QDMS communicate with each other. So like this one, we see the all the corrective action record that we have saved. And also we can create a new one in case we don't have any corrective action is defined so far. So what's happened? Can we create a new one? Yes. And as for the corrective action source, we can pick and choose, like it is coming from the risk assessment, and then the system will connect this corrective action with this risk that we were defining. And also we can define the department and the location in this corrective action record and enter the non-conformity, saying this is about the risk, the health and safety. In addition, we can enter the non-conformity description and record it in QDMS. So this record will be saved in the corrective action module, as known as the CAPA module. After that, we can assign this corrective action to a solution team, and this solution team will take care of the first progress report, like carry out the investigation regarding this risk or this non-conformity, and also define the root cause. On the top, you can see different tabs and the system will take you step by step, like after having the investigation and also defining the root cause, then we can create our corrective action and see if there's any follow-up action is needed in order to make sure this non-conformity or this risk, the chance of this risk are reduced after we perform the corrective action. So once it is ready in the first step, like we define the departments, like the admin and also the location, then we can send this out to the solution team. So as for the solution team, I'm going to pick and choose myself, my account, in order to have a smooth demonstration. And as it is ready, then we can send this out. And this new corrective action record will be created. And as I am now the responsible person, I can also find this particular corrective action as a task on my home screen. So like right here, we just defined the precaution action as a corrective action in order to cope with this risk. And then you can see right here, we have our status as for a corrective action with the reference number under this risk assessment item. And now we can go to the corrective action, which we have just created. As I'm the responsible team, so that I can find this corrective action that I have to file the first progress report. And right here, this is the reference number 255, is the one that we have just created. So right here, I can file my first progress report in order to deal with this non-conformity, or in order to cope with the risk that we have just assessed. So right here, we can create our first progress report and then define the root cause. And on the top, now the corrective action tab, it is it is ready, so that again, the system takes you step by step in order to perform your and manage your corrective action that recorded in QDMS. Once we have the root cause is defined, then we can also create a certain corrective action in order to cope with this root cause. Like as for the risk, why we are having the health and safety issue, and what will be the reason, and how we can cope with this, those can be managed right here. As for the corrective action, then we can pick and choose the action performer, and then add the description into this open text box, and also set up the due date or the deadline for performing this particular corrective action. In addition, we have to pick and choose the root cause for this corrective action record, and we can save this, and this task will be assigned to the action performer, which I have chosen myself, Bimser Int, the account that I'm logging in as this action is now assigned to me. After I log into the system, again, I can find the corrective action that I have to perform on this homepage, and I can find this particular reference number 255.1.1, which is the corrective action that I have to perform. As I have performed, I performed this action, and I have to update the status of this record as well. Like I have to updated the status of this action as performed, or if I need any to postpone or extend the time, the deadline for this action, we can also do so in QDMS. So saying we now performed it, and I have to update what I have done in this open text box and attach any document if there's any. So you are more than welcome to upload and attach it in our system. So once it is ready, then we can update the record, and the system will be sent to the solution team and the responsible team for approval. So you can also manage this approval flow in QDMS, and if there's any follow-up action, we can also define it right here before we close this particular corrective action. And also, in order to help you to manage the risk or find out the risk, you can also use the audit management module, which allows you to create different audit planning. And you can use this module for auditing internally or externally as well. So right here, we have our planning, and we can create a different audit item under this planning, like as for internal audit. Then we can create a different audit for different departments. And while you are managing your audit item, you can pick and choose the audit date, and also the expected estimate finish date, and also the audit time, like starting from, let's say, 11 a.m. till, for example, like 12 p.m. So those can be defined in this audit item. And if you can also invite the auditor and also the auditee to this audit item, because this is those are essential. Otherwise, you don't need even an audit activities. So, and as long as you want to have an audit operations, or you want to manage it, you need an auditor and auditee. And in By using QDMS, another nice features to have is we can pick and choose the questions from the question pool that you upload to the system. So those can be a reference for the auditor, and the auditor doesn't have to spend whole day for preparing the audit operations, and also like help you to save your papers as well. You don't have to print all your questions and prepare like 5 pages of paper for auditing one employee. And in fact, by using our system, you can manage all the questions and record them in digitally in our system. And those will be recorded as you can run your report for having your audit score report or to the corrective action. You can see the corrective action cost report. So those information will be shown by generating this where they make the report in our system. And as for QDMS, there is a reporting tool for every single module that allows you to create the reports and also the graphical report as well. As for this one, like for the corrective action, we want to see which customer that we have filed the most corrective action for. And also we can set up the time frame for this graphical report, and all your data will be shown as a bar chart and also as a table. You can export your report as Excel, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF, or image for sharing with any responsible parties or for preparing your meetings. In addition, you can also see the dashboard in QDMS as well. So it's visualize all the data of your records in QDMS and showed in the ranges of of the dashboard. All your data will be shown as a scorecard, as a list, a bar chart, and also pie chart. And let me show you one of the example. So now the system is taking all the data and putting them into the dashboard. So it's helped you to keep tracking the performance and also monitoring KPIs of your company. So this gives you an overview of what is happening in your company by using our system. It's come to the end of my demonstration. Thank you very much.
Sam, thank you very much for your demonstration. Let me take over the screen and we can continue our summit. Okay, great. So as you saw during Sam's demonstration, you can actually put together your risk assessment on QDMS. You can put together a plan as for precautions. You can also put together corrective actions to mitigate risk in a digital environment. And you can also keep the records of it, followed by reports that's generated automatically for making managerial decisions as well as for audit purposes. So having all these insights together, so let's have some questions addressed and then we'll go from there. So one of the questions, for example, we received is about cyber insurance, Ralph. So can you share a little bit information about cyber insurance, what it is, what it does, and why it is important for companies on a high level, if possible? Maybe a different subject matter, but
yeah,
briefly.
Yeah, that's fine. So basically, it's the most basic is it's a way to mitigate concerns about the various types of cyber events that can occur. It's actually very cost effective. It's so one of the, as the insurance markets have tightened and have gotten a bit more expensive, it's still one that is relatively cost effective, I'll say. And, you know, again, off the shelf provides some levels of first party coverages. You know, you want coverages, there's different types of coverages for different types of business activities you may have. But you want one, obviously, that protects against ransomware, concerns about ransomware, concerns about social engineering, concerns about cyber breach. And really, it helps cover the costs that should a cyber event occur. There are an awful lot of costs that are involved in restoring your network, restoring your reputation. As Will alluded to earlier, the cost of the defense if something had occurred that threaten the business of others inadvertently because of a breach that occurred on your site. So there's a lot of different policy, there's a lot of different terms and conditions that you want to include in there and to be inclusive. And it's definitely worthwhile to have, because the cost, as you will see, really add up in order to get your business up and running again.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Yeah, these are all important considerations, especially nowadays. That's real. I mean, we get a lot of different news about cybersecurity, on a very, very, large organization. So at least we should do our part, right? We should take, we should assess the risk. We should try to mitigate it. At least we should try not to be a easy target, and supported by cyber insurance type of tools, just like Rob mentioned, to make sure we cover our end space. Thank you, Rob. Another question that we see on our list is, that is about actually QDMS. So, we didn't cover it, but there are some questions about document management. So, in terms of document management, is it possible to have different types of documents on QDMS other than PDF?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
If you're referring to the document format, QDMS support Word, Excel, PowerPoint, video, audio, and even image that you can open in the built-in browser of QDMS. And as for the document type, if you have, you can also upload your procedures, specifications, SOPs, training materials to our document management module as well, so that you can read your documents within the built-in browser of our system. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So when we say documents, of course, our actual concept of documents actually is a little bit broad. In addition to Word files or PDF files, documents may be your audio files, your video files. These video files may be your training videos, for example, very, very common. And you basically manage those in QDMS. In this session, we didn't talk more about the document management part of QDMS. We call it control document management module, because it's in a controlled environment with permissions and privileges. But in coming sessions, we'll talk about QDMS's document management module, so you can see it in action as well. And again, if you have any more questions, if you'd like to see it in detail, if you'd like to schedule a meeting specifically for your expectations, you can send email to any of us in our panel, and we'll be able to talk further about it. Okay, let's see on our list. So, Will, one of the questions is about, well, how to manage the complexity of laws and regulations in different states. What if operating in different states? How to manage all these requirements? Yeah, I think this question is about, we need to be aware of the requirements by law and regulations state by state, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the presentations we show. So these are, how to manage these, it's actually a good question in a way that it's a challenge for business people, right? So you need to run your businesses and to run your operations. You need to serve your customers. At the same time, you need to be aware of state by state that you are operating in requirements. So what is the best way to navigate around it? Will, are you there?
Hi, Kevin. I think Will's he is in other meeting. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Looks like in the test box.
Oh, yes. It looks like he got disconnected. Okay. All right. So, we'll address this question some other time, and of course, our audience definitely please please send us an email, or send me an email, or send Will an email for this question, and we'll be happy to address. Looks like looks like Will got disconnected. He may got back, but I'm not sure. So let's continue. All right, great. So another question, let me see on our list. Okay. So one of the questions for you, Rob. So how frequently do you recommend a risk assessment?
So great question. Obviously, I'm going to give you it depends on the type of business you are. What we recommend is obviously you want to do annually any of the risk assessments that you may, you absolutely need to have from an overall basis, but that on at least on a quarterly basis is having, that some sort of, even if it's a shortened review take place, because again, your business models are constantly changing, your risks change with them, as well as the environment that you're involved in. As a full year could pass. Look what happened between now for today and where we were 1 full year ago with COVID just starting. And if you had waited for a full year to do an annual risk assessment, boy, you'd be in a lot different straits in terms of the risks that you were exposed to. So we always recommend quarterly check-ins or opportunity to kind of review or assess within your organization, as well as with your insurance professional and others.
Thank you, Ralph. Much appreciated. Let me see if there is another question on our list. Check Zoom, etc. YouTube. Okay, looks like the others all the questions. Well, in terms of frequency, Sam, I think we can get one more question. So this question is about similar to what Rob actually addressed, but in a digital environment. So does QDMS remind you when it is time to perform a risk assessment on QDMS in a digital environment?
Yes, it does. So that actually in our system, you can set up the reminder, like how often that you want to receive a reminder for updating the records in QDMS. And for example, the risk assessment item that I demonstrated a couple minutes ago. So the system will send you a reminder through email and also a notification within our system. So this is a two-way notification features that you can have, and the system will send you this kind of reminder automatically. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So as you see, I mean, eventually QDMS is a digital tool where you can manage your operations in a digital environment. These operations may be just general management related operations, maybe risk management, maybe quality management, but system basically pushes you forward as to run your operations, as to perform your tasks. So it reminds you again and again and again. And then it sends you reminders, notifications, escalations if needed. It depends on the importance of the operation that you need to be running. So these are really important functionalities as to make sure things are moving forward at the organization, because we all are busy as business professionals, and we may forget things, we may skip things, and these may not be. It doesn't have to be this way. So basically, by utilizing QDMS, then you can just get the reminders, you can be on top of your tasks, and you can keep things running. Especially when it comes to risk, nothing can wait. That is a fact. So when something needs to be done in the scope of risk management, especially when you are working remotely, that has to be done at that time as actually it is scheduled. So that is critical. So, well, I think we addressed all the questions. There may be some more questions, but what I'm going to do is, well, I will suggest you to send us an email. I also saw Bill's message as well. So please send us an email if you have any more questions. We'll be happy to address and continue this conversation and schedule a separate meeting to address your challenges in terms of risk management, risk assessment, risk mitigation, from insurance point of view, from legal point of view, from digital transformation, managing from digital point of view in terms of QDMS. So we all are will be happy to address your questions moving forward. Rob, before we end this session, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
No, other than the fact that I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the group. Very impressed with the solution that Sam had talked about as well earlier, and I think it kind of ties back to what I and then Will alluded to as well, which is the importance of documentation and the ability to provide a way for consistency. And I think that that Sam helped demonstrate that as well, which is huge. So there's such a big tie-in for all of this in terms of mitigating risks as well as optimizing efficiencies.
Rob, thank you very much for your help, support, as always, sharing insights. Your expertise is very important. As always, thank you very much, and we are definitely looking forward to having you in our coming panels and panel meetings as well. I appreciate it.
Same here. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So actually, this session was actually great. The timing-wise, I think we are doing well, so we can just continue as to our schedule. So we had our expert hour minutes ago about risk management, risk assessment, remote work, and mitigating risk from insurance and from legal point of view. And we have Rob with us from USI Insurance, and we had Bill with us from the Lambecker law firm. So they shared important information with us as to how to manage risk, how to mitigate it, what to think, and how to be proactive, which is my favorite term of the day, I must say. And then we also perform QDMS demonstration as to how you can manage your risk assessment and risk management operations in a digital environment with QDMS. Moving forward, now we have another expert hour, and we'll be talking about ISO 9001 for manufacturing industry. Let's keep in mind, ISO 9001 is actually a universal quality management standard, and it's not only designed for manufacturing. In this meeting, we may be addressing many different things from the manufacturing point of view. Just know that ISO 9001 is actually really vertical free. You can be ISO 9001 certified, or you can be practicing ISO 9001 in any industry. So the fundamentals that we'll be sharing with you in a couple of minutes is actually universal, and you can actually benefit from in any industry. In the same way, the demonstration that we'll be showing in terms of QDMS, even though we'll be addressing manufacturing industry while complying with ISO 9001 standards, and information that we'll be sharing with you is actually also universal, can be applied to any industry in any region. So moving forward, I'd like to invite our panel to our next session. Alex, are you with us?
Yes, Kevin, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I hear you loud and clear. That's
okay.
Perfect.
Very good. Very good. Yes.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. So let me introduce our panel at the start, and we can continue our summit, I must say. So we have Alex Kvartirov with us. Alex is from MYOB Consulting. He is the president of MYOB Consulting organization company. He is also certified lead ISO auditor, and we have been working with Alex closely for a while, and he's always very supportive or very helpful in different cases as for ISO 9001 quality management and other compliance related operations. Also, I must say, Alex has a lot of information and knowledge in aerospace industry, in addition to ISO 9001. So when we talk about aerospace and defense industry, what we are talking about in terms of quality management standards is AS 9100. So Alex has also a lot of information and knowledge and experience, hands-on experience in AS 9100 compliance as well in aerospace and defense industry. Today, we'll talk about ISO 9001, what it is, what are the fundamentals of ISO 9001, why it is important for organizations to have ISO 9001, and how you can comply with ISO in a digital environment with the help of QDMS, which is a proprietary software system of Bimser International. Before further ado, also I'd like to also introduce my colleague Samvat with us, and we'll be talking about QDMS with him. Also, we have our QDMS product manager for Canvas also is with us, so he'll be also helping us in terms of addressing questions moving forward in our summit about QDMS. Great. So Alex, if you are ready, why don't you take over the screen and tell us about fundamentals of ISO 9001. Virtual stage is yours. Let me stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
All right. Can you see my screen?